Last week in Michigan politics, the latest on the battle over the state budget. Just weeks to go until the government could shut down. Plus, popular lakeshore communities wrestling with what to do when it comes to short-term rentals. What was decided this week? And with talk of whether the Supreme Court will decide to overturn nationwide same-sex marriage within the next year, what a post-marriage equality America would mean for couples in Michigan. I'm Josh Alburtus, and this is your 13 on Your Side Rundown. And we begin with new developments on the state budget this week. Michigan House Republicans could move on their budget proposal as soon as next week. That's according to the House Appropriations Chair. Weeks after the statutory deadline of July 1st, a school aid budget has still not been passed by the legislature, leaving schools wondering about what level of funding they'll receive as the school year is already underway. Democrats in control of the Senate passed a full proposal in May. Republicans in control of the House have passed an education budget proposal. Both sides essentially pointing fingers at the other for the delay. The Michigan legislature will have to pass a full budget and have it signed by Governor Gretchen Whitmer by October 1st to avoid a government shutdown. And no state budget, no pay for state lawmakers. That's what House Republicans attempted this week, as Michigan still is without that budget weeks after the legal deadline. By law, the budget was supposed to be done by July 1st, but because that language is essentially toothless and doesn't have any enforcement power, lawmakers have blown past it. The amendment to Michigan's Constitution looked to withhold lawmaker pay if they do not meet that deadline. In order for a constitutional amendment to be made through the legislative pathway, 2/3 of both the state House and Senate would need to approve, and it would then need to be sent to a statewide vote. But on Thursday, the resolution did not make it past the House, even with bipartisan support. And back to school means backpacks, new teachers, and for many families, a big question mark about what's on the lunch tray. Michigan's free school meals program is currently only funded through the end of September, and lawmakers in Lansing still haven't passed that budget for the school year. 13 on Your Side's Kiara Patterson tells us how local groups are helping.
One thing that kids should not have to worry about is where their healthy meals are coming from.
For the past 2 years, Michigan public school students have had free breakfast and lunch for all students, regardless of income. But with the state school aid budget undecided, the program could end after September 30th, leaving families anxious and Kids Food Basket trying to help.
There's a lot of instability and a lot of unknowns right now around the free breakfast and lunch program based on what the state budget ends up being.
Austin Ruloffs of Kids Food Basket says the nonprofit, mostly donation funded, serves 11,000 healthy sack suppers to more than 60 West Michigan schools every weekday.
And we know that kids can't learn and teachers can't teach without full bellies and healthy food at the end of the school day, right?
The need is growing. Some Michigan schools, like Okemos Public Schools near Lansing, will no longer offer free meals, while others, like Forest Hills and Kent County, will continue them for the time being. Across just 4 counties, 41,000 children are food insecure. On Tuesday, the Kent Intermediate School District will meet with all districts to decide on a course of action.
We've seen budgets really stretched, not only at a government level, but at a family level, individual levels. We're hearing from schools and principals and teachers in areas that we've never heard from before in our 23 years, looking for food resources.
State officials are urging schools to offer free meals at the start of the year for student health, attendance, and learning, but warn federal program changes can't be reversed mid-year. With meals uncertain, demands may spike, but Ruloff says Kids Food Basket will continue helping families.
We're going to continue to be there. We're going to continue to show up for our kids and families no matter what happens with the state budget. We know that our community cares, and so we're going to continue to show up for our community.
And maybe the start of the school year, but education advocates are trying to address future budget issues on a future ballot. 13 on Your Side's Lauren Baker has more on the Invest in MI Kids proposal, which advocates hope will be placed on the ballot in 2026.
School may be on the top of parents' minds, but education advocates want them to also be thinking about the next election.
I, as an individual and as a director in my organization, deeply believe that every child deserves a public education that prepares them for the future.
That's Rochelle Crow-Hercher, president of the Invest in MI Kids initiative. It's the latest proposal created by some education advocates in the state to address funding issues.
There have been numerous nonpartisan studies that show that, one, Michigan is underfunding education. And two, the number that we use is out of a report by the School Finance Resource Collaborative that says that Michigan is $4.5 billion short of just adequately funding schools in this state.
To solve this, advocates have created this proposal that would add an additional 5% tax on single filers making over $500,000 a year or joint filers making over $1 million.
And it would all be restricted to the school aid fund for the use in 3 areas, which is paratechnical education, reducing class size, and retaining and recruiting educators.
She says what makes this topic even more important is the fact that a state budget hasn't been passed.
The problem that we have with the state budget is folks are just not coming to the table to talk about this in a serious way. Yes, having more funds would make this discussion a lot easier, but I think right now what we have is people who are not prioritizing the well-being of students in Michigan.
And she hopes the passing of this proposal will help ease some of that burden so that every student can be successful.
Also at the state capitol, justice activists in the state are pushing for a constitutional amendment to enshrine a ranked choice voting system in Michigan. State House lawmakers have voted to explicitly ban it. Ranked choice voting involves rounds of voting in which lower vote getters are gradually eliminated and those votes reallocated to those voters' next top choice until there is an outright winner. If the constitutional amendment was successful, a state law banning it could not be enforced. National Guard troops from a number of states are expected to pour into Washington, D.C. President Donald Trump's administration has signaled it's an effort to crack down on crime. But others fear what they see as a dangerous precedent and fear what areas could be the next target. We heard from state lawmakers this week about a push to limit when outside troops can enter our cities. Federal troops and military vehicles across the nation's capital.
I'm announcing a historic action to rescue our nation's capital from crime, bloodshed, bedlam, and squalor.
More troops were expected to D.C. from at least 6 Republican-led states. But what President Donald Trump's administration has heralded as an effort to rein in crime has sparked dire concerns about what and who could be the next target.
These are paramilitary tactics. That's authoritarianism, and it will not bring public safety. At least not a democracy.
The president has reportedly suggested more cities could be subject to similar efforts.
We have witnessed the deployment of military personnel across the country, which raises an alarm among civil rights advocates, legal scholars, and everyday Americans.
Now lawmakers in Michigan moving to try and keep what they see as unlawful deployment from happening here.
My bill to prohibit the deployment of an armed military force from another state, territory, or district here in Michigan without the governor's approval or a valid, the key word being valid, order from the president.
It's especially a concern in cities like Detroit, represented by those like Tyrone Carter.
Good policing is about protecting the civilians we serve, not treating them like enemies on the battlefield. That's the role of military. Police are different.
I also represent Detroit, and I have very serious concerns about how this could possibly be weaponized against Detroit.
The bill would face an uncertain future under a Republican-led state house, but in these leaders' view, it's worth the try.
What we're trying to do is give courts, who seem to be the only entity really trying to push back against some of these actions, all of the tools possible, including our state courts.
A stretch of US 131 in Moskegan County will be named for a soldier from Stanwood killed from injuries he suffered while serving in Iraq. Sergeant Matthew Weber died in 2006, 5 months after a roadside bomb blew up and injured him. He was just 23 years old when he passed away. Governor Gretchen Whitmer has signed a bill into law that was sponsored by a Republican from Clare. It designates US 131 between 11 Mile Road and Old State Road as the Sergeant Matthew Weber Memorial Highway. Money used to help victims of crime might be held up due to new conditions added by the Trump administration. It's all connected to the government's immigration efforts. 13 on your side, Lauren Baker heard from State Attorney General Dana Nestle this week about a lawsuit she's joining to get the conditions dropped.
I think to make crime victims a political, part of this political gamesmanship by the federal government is just deeply disturbing.
That's Attorney General Dana Nestle's reaction to the Trump administration's latest requests surrounding immigration efforts. Nestle says the Trump administration, through the Department of Justice, is trying to block federally funded money to the Victims of Crime Act grants, better known as VOCA, if states fail to assist the Department of Homeland Security's immigration efforts.
We're talking about $37 million for the next fiscal year that's owed to Michigan. It funds all kinds of things like domestic violence shelters, child advocacy centers, rape crisis centers, human trafficking organizations.
VOCA was signed into law in 1984 by President Ronald Reagan, and Nestle says what the DOJ is doing goes against it.
For them to come in and say it doesn't matter that this has been the law for over 40 years and that we're required to release this money to the states, and they don't get to do that.
She says some of the requirements a state would have to follow is providing the personal information of a victim or witness of a crime to ICE. In Michigan, victims are able to protect their identity through the Address Confidentiality Program if they fear their assailant could come after them. Nestle says by ignoring this program, we could be putting victims in more danger.
Now to say that anybody at ICE can request your personal information like that, when you've been the victim of a serious crime, it's very, very disturbing. And we fear that this information could be used to re-victimize people.
She also says the efforts could deter undocumented immigrants from reporting crimes or being key witnesses out of fear of being deported.
Honestly, what it means is we're going to have far fewer successful prosecutions, and that perpetrator will then be able to go on and commit more crimes and create more victims.
Now, as of earlier this week, the state was still expected to receive those funds, but it was up in the air if the state will be able to in the future. And a coal-fired power plant in Ottawa County has drawn a lot of scrutiny lately. While its owner had planned to retire it earlier this year, the federal government ordered it to remain ready to operate until Thursday. And now they've done it again. Coming up, details on the new order from the Department of Energy and when the plant could now be expected to begin shutting down. The U.S. Supreme Court will decide later this year whether to take up a case on overturning the constitutional protection for same-sex marriages nationwide. But with federal protections and a state constitutional ban on same-sex marriage, what would a repeal of that right mean for couples in Michigan? We verify. Talk around same-sex marriage in the United States made new headlines this month after the U.S. Supreme Court was asked to overturn its landmark 2015 ruling in Obergefell v. Hodges that guaranteed same-sex marriage nationwide. The possibility of Obergefell being overturned has had many asking what it would mean for their marriages, especially in a state like Michigan, where the state constitution may conflict with new federal law. So what would a post-Obergefell America mean for same-sex couples in Michigan? Let's verify. Our sources include the Michigan Constitution, the Respect for Marriage Act passed by Congress in 2022, and Tracy Brain, Associate Dean at Cooley Law School. Following a statewide vote in 2004, Michigan's constitution has included a small but consequential clause saying that, quote, the union of one man and one woman in marriage shall be the only agreement recognized as a marriage or similar union for any purpose. So if Obergefell was overturned and the issue sent back to the states, Michigan would not be performing same-sex marriages anymore. But that doesn't necessarily mean people who live here wouldn't be able to have their marriage rights recognized here. That's where federal law comes in.
It does require the U.S. federal government and all U.S. states, right, to recognize the validity of same-sex marriage.
The Respect for Marriage Act was passed by Congress 3 years ago and requires the federal government and all states to recognize the rights of marriages performed where it is legal. So if I lived in Michigan, for example, but got married in a state like New York and came back, Michigan would still have to respect that marriage. But what about pre-existing marriages?
The act is is pretty clear, right, that at the federal level and right at the state level, existing marriages should be respected, right, across the 50 states and even into the territories.
When determining if a marriage is valid in a state, the act says only the law of the state at the time the marriage was entered can be considered. It also should be mentioned that the Supreme Court isn't yet guaranteed to hear the case at all. That decision will be made later this year. With your Verify, I'm Josh Alburtus. Just as the U.S. Department of Energy's emergency declaration used to keep operable a Consumers Energy-owned coal-fired power plant in West Olive was set to expire, the DOE issued a new declaration that will keep the plant open even further. The J.H. Campbell plant will now need to stay open until at least November 19th. The DOE justified its decision by citing a reliability assessment of the regional grid, known as MISO, that forecasted an elevated risk of shortfalls this summer. The DOE then cited that the JH plant generated over 660,000 megawatt hours for the grid in June alone. Consumers Energy noted this summer in a filing that complying with the DOE order from the end of May through June had a net financial impact of $29 million. They say they will look to recover costs from MISO grid users. The utility company shared a statement with 13 on Your Side, saying in part, quote, "We are evaluating the order extension and expect to continue operating the plant as required by DOE. We are also pleased that FERC approved our request to recover costs associated with plant operations and allocate those costs across MISO's north and central regions consistent with the DOE order." The 13 on Your Side asked the DOE for a statement regarding the order, but as of earlier this week, had not heard back. The economy in West Michigan is starting to feel the effects of tariffs implemented by the Trump administration. That's what a new study by GVSU researchers suggests. They surveyed local businesses and purchasing managers and found signs that the economy is leveling off. Other signs of a slowing economy include reduced short-term business confidence and a rise in Grand Rapids' year-over-year unemployment rate. Researchers say the survey results mirror national trends. Feeding America West Michigan started a donation fund this week as it deals with supplying food to those in need amid federal funding cuts. 13 on Your Side's Lance Wilhelm dropped by the food center to hear from those affected.
Over the past few months, we've been talking a lot about how federal funding cuts will impact organizations like this one, Feeding America West Michigan, but those involved say the issue isn't just a decrease in supply, it's also a vast increase in demand.
We have had to sacrifice our car repairs to make up for grocery expenses.
Like many who struggle with food insecurity, Amanda Valls has to make tough choices every day as she tries to feed her family while also paying for everything else her kids have going on.
Rarely can we contribute to their sports registration fees or equipment. Sorry. They've had to bargain with their coaches to work off the prices of wrestling and rugby shoes.
Christmas presents, birthday parties, and having our kids' friends over to play are things that at times have to be sacrificed just to make ends meet. And she's not alone in her struggle.
The number is definitely increasing.
Cheryl Youngquist works for a food pantry that's supported by Feeding America West Michigan, an organization that's losing $2.2 million worth of its food supply over the next couple months because of federal funding cuts.
The last few months have been rough because there's a lot of what if for our neighbors, wondering will the programs continue, will the food keep coming?
The cuts are decreasing supply when demand is at a high. Feeding America says it's been helping 70% more families in West Michigan and the Upper Peninsula over the past few years. And as cuts continue to hit, they think demand will only get worse as hundreds of thousands lose benefits they've relied on for years.
It doesn't matter what level you're at, that unknown creates stress and uncertainty for all of us.
The organization started a donation fund to help bridge the gap through cuts with a goal of $1.5 million.
We are going to be there for our neighbors,
hoping to keep providing for West Michiganders in need like Amanda.
If our communities are healthy, our people have food, they have access to the medical and the things that they need, we all benefit.
In addition to donating and volunteering where you can, Feeding America West Michigan says another great way to help is by contacting your local representative. In Kentwood, Lance Wilhelm, 13 on Your Side.
Millions of dollars are now coming to the Grand Rapids area to help fight an invasive species killing our fish. It's a key step, officials say, as they still hope to move forward with their Restore the Rapids plan. We were downtown this week to find out what's being done.
What if we told you that vampires haunt the Great Lakes? Believe it or not, in a sense, it's true. But they're not the kind of vampires you see in the movies.
I haven't been human for 200 years.
These ones that sit in the deepest parts of our lakes are actually fish.
Before we were able to control them, they were killing about 110 million pounds of fish a year. They're killing about 10 million pounds of fish now.
The sea lamprey is often called the vampire of the Great Lakes, as the invasive species latches onto native fish and kills about 40 pounds per lamprey.
We estimate that only about 1 in 7 fish that are attacked by a sea lamprey will survive.
And getting rid of them can be costly.
This is one of the only ones in the Great Lakes that we know how to control, and it's not inexpensive.
Now officials are celebrating roughly $2 million federal dollars for the Great Lakes Fishery Commission to, in part, block lamprey from moving further into the Grand River.
The barrier that this money will go to help design and construct is incredibly cost effective, paying for itself in just a little over a decade.
Now, it's about a mile upstream from here near the 6th Street Dam in Grand Rapids, where officials say this barrier against sea lamprey is going to be built.
And it's for a reason.
They have a drive to swim upstream.
As officials move forward with their Restore the Rapids plan that includes removing local dams, not having a barrier would mean leaving the river open to invasion.
If that dam were to be removed without a sea lamprey barrier in its place, this river would basically open up about 4,000 miles of new sea lamprey habitat, not just the river, but also the tributaries to that river.
We will do this all in a way that not only protects our most precious resource, but also helps to restore the namesake of our city, the Grand Rivers Rapids.
Popular lakeshore communities figuring out what to do when it comes to short-term rentals. What was decided this week? That's next. The Grand Rapids Planning Commission met last week for a public hearing on Matthews House Ministry. The organization has been trying to get approval to move into a larger building on the city's northwest side, but many people are speaking out against it. 13 on Your Side was at the meeting listening to comments from residents about the proposed move. More than 20 people commented, both in support of and in opposition to the move of Matthews House from 7th Street to Leonard on the city's northwest side. Representatives from Matthews House say the move is very needed to help serve the unhoused population of that side of the city. They added that they've outgrown their current space and need more square footage. The City Planning Commission also heard from Matthews House workers and those who have benefited from their services, saying that it is needed in the community.
I can't thank them enough for making me a human being again. I wish you would open the doors to a new place, more space. We can get people like me to be clothed and healthy and be able to speak.
They've provided no evidence that they can operate in a way that aligns with the character of the neighborhood. I urge you, please consider the absence of action, the absence of outreach, the absence of operational discipline, and the ongoing unresolved problems.
Following public comment, the Planning Commission held lengthy discussions on the community's input from both sides before eventually approving the Matthews House move to a new location. The city of Grand Haven will allow short-term rentals in the Center Town District. The decision to amend the existing zoning ordinance was approved unanimously by the City Council this week. Leaders hope that allowing short-term rentals in this area near downtown will help to revitalize and provide more traffic for local businesses. However, the new policy does not allow for short-term rentals without restrictions.
It's required to have on the ground floor a prerequisite to be usable floor area to be retail or commercial. You wouldn't qualify it any other way to not have if it's parking or residential, that wouldn't work. This just kind of enhances that and will pretty much guarantee actually will guarantee that the ground floor retail commercial uses will be there, and if they want to be able to achieve a residential above and short-term rental.
The ordinance also requires that parking for rental units must be located behind the building to keep parking on the street open for visitors. And a new 9-person committee in Laketown Township near Holland will listen to comments and concerns from neighbors about short-term rentals. While no decisions will be made right now, changes could be made by the township's planning commission in the future. 13 on Your Side's Micah Cho talked to a neighbor who lives next to one of the rentals who shared his concerns.
There is currently a 6-month ban or moratorium started back in May on short-term rentals in Laketown Township. Now, that doesn't prevent current ones from continuing to operate. However, the township is not currently accepting applications for new ones to pop up. Now, one neighbor that I talked to told me that he hopes that the township can find some way to regulate on how these continue to operate.
You know, they were outside one day and I came over and said, "Hey, are you guys my new neighbors?" And they were, "No, this is an Airbnb. We're just here for the weekend."
Gil Lalo is describing the first time he saw new people at his neighbor's house off of Pine Drive in Laketown Township. He says it was then, around 2 years ago, he found out that the house had been turned into a short-term rental. With that, he adds, came some concerns.
With the people coming and going, you never know who you're going to get, and so you have to be a little more careful. You know, what you leave outside and that kind of thing.
While new people come and go, Lalo does say the experience has been mostly pleasant.
Most of the people have been pretty well behaved, but, you know, occasionally you get some loud people, and then, you know, we just want to chill and live our lives, especially in the summer. We want the windows open.
Still, Lalo hopes that a special committee made up of Laketown Township Board and Planning Committee members come up with a way to regulate new rentals. He and his family live in a subdivision not too far away from Holland and not close to any public beach. While he says he understands the need for them, he does believe his neighborhood is not the right fit.
You know, I'm sympathetic that they've got to come up with something consistent, and it's a hard problem to solve. But something needs to be done, because otherwise, why have zoning laws at all? Why have a township government at all? What do I pay taxes for, you know?
The township is continuing to hold meetings to address the issue. While there isn't any current action on the table, the Planning Commission could propose a change in the rules during a future meeting. Now, these future meetings are scheduled for Wednesday, September 3rd and Wednesday, October 1st at 6 o'clock p.m., and they will be located via Zoom. And we'll have more information on how you can connect with the township through those meetings on our website, 13onyourside.com. For now, in Laketown Township, I'm Micah Cho for 13 on Your Side.
From new connections to long-awaited upgrades, Muskegon County Airport is using federal dollars to make moves and better serve travelers. 13 on Your Side's Alexis Dumergine has an update on those upgrades.
Big changes are coming here to Muskegon County Airport, from sleek renovations to a new restaurant to a new airline that has now opened up the runway for more connections through Chicago.
This is one of the older airports in West Michigan. It was laid down in 1929. And really started with passenger service after World War II. Became an FAA certified passenger commercial service airport in 1973, and we've had commercial air service ever since.
Today, that history is meeting major updates, including a $21 million airfield construction project.
We're replacing some of the oldest and most deteriorated pavement on the field. The second is we're updating all the airfield geometry to align with the modern airport design standards. So this is really a great improvement for us that's going to improve aviator safety here in Muskegon.
The airport is also working to reopen its terminal restaurant, closed since 2016, to serve both travelers and the public.
We want it to be a destination. You know, we want it to be something that draws people to this airport for something other than flying.
Muskegon's only commercial carrier, Denver Air Connection, now partners with Delta, United, and American, making it easier to book trips through major hubs.
So, you know, with one quick connection in Chicago, you can pretty much go just about anywhere, domestic or overseas.
Passenger service is already up from last year, and more growth is in sight, including a Milwaukee route in 2026 and talks with low-cost carriers.
We're also looking at the low-cost carriers, direct flights to the vacation markets that West Michigan loves so much. You know, the Panhandle, the Gulf side, and the ocean side of Florida, in Las Vegas, Nashville. There's all sorts of opportunities on the table. And
Airport officials say it's just the beginning, with more upgrades on the horizon to keep Muskegon flying forward. In Muskegon, Alexis Dumergine, 13 on Your Side.
The Michigan Municipal League now has what they call a bold strategy to increase affordable housing in Michigan. They were joined for the announcement this week by lawmakers from across the state. The plan is to boost construction and rehabilitation projects while also reworking zoning rules to accelerate development. It would be paid for with a $160 million annual investment over 5 years. They say the plan will lead to the development of more than 10,000 affordable housing units in Michigan. And we have more news coming up after the break. Before we go, we want to share some news about 13 on Your Side's parent company, Tegna. This week, NextStar Media Group announced plans to acquire Tegna for $6.2 billion. The deal is expected to close in the second half of next year, pending approval from federal regulators and shareholders, and would establish the country's largest local broadcasting company with 265 television stations across 44 states. This comes as there's been a signaled interest within the federal government to deregulate local media. We would note that NextStar already owns our competitor, Wood TV8, and NextStar's CEO telling CNBC this week that in markets like this one, where both NextStar and Tegna operate stations, those operations would be combined into one facility. For whatever may come down the line, we will continue to do our jobs. We will continue to bring you the stories of our government and our politics that impact you in the best way we can, and that looks to respect the diverse beliefs and voices of our people. And we look forward to doing so. And that's the rundown for your week in Michigan politics. Be sure to keep up with all the top political stories of the day, both on air and online at 13onyourside.com.